Okay, hello, here we go. I'm so excited to bring you a little drawing lesson. I wanted to say hi with my face in front of the camera so you know I'm here. um, and just tell you a little bit about what we're gonna do. So we're gonna draw something like this together. And I just wanted to encourage you about a couple general things to start with. And the first is not to take this too seriously. Okay, this isn't meant to be a finished piece of fine art. I want you to hold it really loosely and remember there's no such thing as a mistake. There are parts of this drawing that I'll talk about as we go that maybe didn't go according to plan, or that I didn't really enjoy how it was looking, but I didn't start over. I didn't erase it. I tried to move forward. Sometimes that's not possible. I realize that sometimes there are things that are just goofs and they're learning opportunities and you can start over. But to whatever degree you can, I really encourage you to just have fun and experiment and play and try not to hold on too tightly to your expectations of how the end product turns out. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump on in. I'll walk you through everything, and please at the end give me feedback. I'd love to know how this works for you, how your drawing turns out, and how I can make these little mini lessons serve you better. So if you have any feedback about the videos or the logistics or the projects themselves, I'm all ears. Okay, have a great time, and we'll talk to you at the end. Okay, so to begin with, your materials, you need a piece of paper, a pencil, and markers in a couple of widths. So a fine point and a thicker point. And you can use a double tip one like you see there, or individual markers. And the thicknesses themselves don't really matter. Just a thinner and a heavier weight would be great. So we're going to start by putting a circle in the center of our paper. And if you feel really worried about drawing a circle, you can always trace a bowl like this, putting it upside down, and I showed you this one just to give you an idea of how big you want it. But one trick I like to do is to try and freehand a circle, and no one can do a perfect circle freehand. So one trick I use is just to do this, what I'm doing, drawing multiple circles over and over and over again, kind of using the physicality of my whole arm rather than just my hand. And what happens is, by the law of averages, you'll end up with a pretty good circle somewhere in there, even if all of the individual circles you've drawn are oblong. So go ahead and do that, and then you're going to draw a vertical line halfway down your circle, and then you're going to mark the midway point on that vertical line. And what we're doing now is we're going to draw the peaks. So we're going to block them in by drawing one peak in the middle, and the top of the peak, you'll notice now, is about dead center in the circle. And the ridge line is going to stop about a quarter of the way right and left, if that makes sense. So then you're going to complete the ridge, and the details don't matter about the shapes, but you can follow me exactly if you want, doing two little ridges on the right and then two little ridges on the left, just making sure they're not too perfectly symmetrical, so they're a little uneven. And once you feel happy with your shape, what you're going to do is extend one of the ridge lines on the left all the way down to meet the edge of the circle on the right. You're going to add a layer of another little shorter ridge in front on the right, lower. So again, we're going for asymmetry, but balance. And then you're going to extend another ridge line down to mark this kind of halfway through that line and the top ridge line. And then you're going to block in a ridge almost in the middle ground there. So now we're kind of getting our ridges all blocked in. You can see the particulars of how they layer. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks basically. We're going to move on to our sun and moon. So draw a circle, maybe the size of a, silver dollar. It's probably bigger than a quarter. And then you're going to start creating the rays of the sun just on the left half though. And you're going to make them extend out from the center, sort of at regular intervals, not too crowded, towards the perimeter of the main circle. And then the right side of that circle is going to be a little crescent moon. So just sort of sketching in the shape. Now you might be wondering, like, what am I going to do with all these pencil marks? They will get covered up or erased. It doesn't matter. Just keep a light touch as you go. We're just blocking everything in. Okay, so now we're going to move back to the peaks. There's no reason I did it in this order, but you're going to start from the top of each peak, and you're just going to make a random zigzag line down until you hit the next ridge in the foreground or the edge of the circle. So it's almost like, a ski line or It's just a zigzag, random, sketchy, wiggly line down from the top of each peak. And if you don't like the particular shape, you can kind of edit it to go a little more sideways in either direction, just varying the particulars so there's a little difference. In that one, I put a little elbow. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and start inking in our drawing, and I want you to grab your heavier weight or one of your thicker line markers. And this is going to be a really scary part. Drawing a circle permanently freehand is mildly terrifying, I confess. But some tricks and tips for you. See how my wrist is still and I just rotate it with a point of contact on the paper, okay? So I'm not trying to hover in the air because your line will be wobbly. I'm not turning my paper, and I do it in sections to match the sort of the natural arc of my wrist. And you'll notice that that first pass is not perfect, but then what I get to do is I'm going to thicken it. And by increasing the weight, I can kind of compensate for all the little wibbles and wobbles and joints and errors. Again, there's that word, mistakes, errors. It's not, it's just part of the process, and I haven't gotten done with the process of drawing the circle yet. So just use the stability of your anatomy. Like the bigger bones in your body are going to be more stable. The smaller bones and motions are going to be more precise. And for a big circle like this, you sort of want to leverage the natural arc of your anatomy. So anchor one point of your hand or your wrist on the paper, and then just rotate it, and it'll draw the curve of the circle, I promise, trust me. And then again, you can always go through, and I want you to make a really thick outer circle. So you can do like the width of 2 or 3, marker widths by the time you're done. So there we've got our outer circle. It's not perfect, and that is okay. It's really okay. Mine is not even a perfect circle. It's kind of squished top bottom. It's a little oblong, and I am totally comfortable with that, and I want to invite you to sort of relax your desire for perfection. So with this heavier weight marker, we're going to go ahead and start outlining our ridge lines. Now, when you do a drawing like this with a lot of line work, and especially with a horizon, the points of the drawing, or the pieces of the drawing that you want to emphasize most, sorry about the bird noises in the background if you can hear them, the pieces that you want to emphasize most, you're going to put in a heavier line weight. So the very topmost ridge line, I really want to pop out. I want it to show the shape of the mountains, to just clarify the drawing and be a clear division between sky and mountain. So I'm going to make it quite bold in its line. So I'm going over it a couple times, not necessarily to make it thicker, but really just to even it out where maybe it didn't get quite as thick in places. So there I've got a nice heavyweight line. And then I'm going to go through, excuse me, and I'm going to ink in the tops of each individual ridge with this thicker marker. But you'll notice I'm probably not going to darken it right away anyway, to the extent of the very topmost ridge line. Now, I want you to pay attention to how fast you are drawing lines, or how sort of you're whizzing through your drawing, or how slow you go. And I want to encourage you just to slow down, not only as a way to sort of refine the quality of your work, but also just to change your experience. So you're not in any hurry. There's no rush. There's no one timing you or waiting for this. Just slow your pace and really take care, I think, is what I want to encourage you to do. Like, a drawing is nothing but a bunch of lines put together, and I want you to take a bunch of care with how they are coming through you onto the paper. So we've moved on to the sun and the moon. So I inked the half of the sun, right? Just a half circle on the left. And on the right, what we're going to do is actually end up coloring the sky in. So rather than drawing lines, we're actually going to block out negative space. So you'll notice that what I did with those 2 lines for the moon was make them a little bigger than the shape of the finished moon. Because once you start coloring in, the Sharpies bleed inevitably on paper, and you just want to make sure you're making your moon the size that you want it to be. So I'm going to create a little outline for the sky, and I'm going to leave just the smallest little gap of white as a horizon line to separate sky from mountains. Because if I just draw black right up against that ridge line, the mountains are going to sort of disappear into the sky. And, I wasn't sure about that move starting out with. I realized I might cover up that little white gap. But remember, it's always easier to add more marker. You can't take it away. So if you have any doubt or want to try something, leave it and you can always color back over it. So again, I kind of like bopping around through a drawing, do a little bit here, a little bit there, because you can see it come to life um, sort of in tandem or in harmony rather than doing the whole sky and then moving to the mountains. So I've chosen my finer line marker and I'm just I'm just tracing the pencil lines that I had put in earlier. So I drew a squiggly line from the peak down to whatever intersecting line comes next. And so the next step here is to draw some sort of contour lines. Now, this is where we're going to talk about mistakes not being mistakes. So I had this idea that I sort of wanted to just show tiny little like hairline lines to not have the blank side of the mountain that we're going to leave white look quite so flat. And so I thought, oh, maybe I'll put like little, root shape or branch shaped tendrils. Now, two things happen. One is I put some of them on the wrong side of that squiggly line, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. And then the other is I just don't like the way they look particularly. So we're going to evolve them in a little while. You're welcome to just don't follow me with this. Don't add these tendrils unless you want to just follow the experience. Maybe yours will turn out looking a little different. So maybe it's helpful to talk about what I don't like. So this fine tip Sharpie was bleeding a little bit more than I would like on the paper. You can't quite tell it from here, but the lines were sort of fuzzy and thicker than I wanted. It was looking in my mind, I was feeling discouraged and, breaking my own rules and saying things like how crappy it looked and, oh my gosh, what am I doing? So, do what you want here. This is sort of artist's choice, but looking into the future, you have a little bit of a fortune telling power here. And I'm telling you that these lines were something I was not happy with. So the ultimate goal, however, is to make the side of each peak, which is away from the sun and moon, be shaded. And we're going to do that with parallel lines. And then the side of the peak, which is facing the sun and the moon, is going to be light or left white with some contour lines. So my goal was to draw these sort of contour lines just on the lighter sides. But again, I wasn't paying close enough attention. You'll see in that very center peak, they ended up on both sides because I chose the wrong side. So moving on, this part you can definitely follow me. We're going to draw just a bunch of parallel lines on the face of the mountain that is away from the light. Now, we're not doing a realistic drawing here, okay? This isn't meant to be a realistic rendition of a peak. It's just meant to be the feeling of a peak. And I'm drawing a bunch of parallel lines that follow the line of the edge of the ridge. So you'll notice that they kind of follow the angle of the top of the mountain. And then I just work my way down. Sometimes I leave little gaps so that I come back and fill it in and it's not quite so regular. And, if your lines aren't perfectly straight, that's okay. Wobbly, wiggly is actually, it gives it a lot of texture and life. You can play with how close they are, how far apart they are. So I finished one and now I'm going to switch to the other side. And just to show you that I'm shading it on the side that's away from the light. So on this side, I'm going to follow that ridge line right there. That's my starting line, and then I can fill in above and fill in below. And I want to make sure the lines touch my little ski track line and touch the edge of the circle. Okay, so I think, are getting the idea of how to add some lines as shading. And I'm mapping out here, you can see me showing you which ones I'm going to shade in, but I'm going to skip ahead and you'll notice that I did the opposite side of that center peak than I really intended. And it's okay. Check it out. Like some of those contour lines ended up in my little shading contours and they just kind of do their thing. And I'll show you a little trick later. We're going to make just a thicker line. We'll hide them more. And even though, the perception of where the light is falling is opposite in both of those peaks, it's not a realistic rendition. It's just an illustration. So you can break the rules. And if I hadn't pointed that out to you, probably no one would even know. No one's going to care. So, in adding the lines for the sun now, I want you to start by sort of dividing the half where the sun is in halves. So I started with the horizontal line and then I did lines kind of midway through and then splitting the gap each time. And you're going to put quite a few lines. It's going to feel really tight. If you just do, 4 or 5 lines as the rays, it's going to look a little bit like a, kid's sun, like here's a circle and here's some sticks. But as you start filling it in, it actually gives it a little bit of a pattern or a texture. And the way I make these lines is by doing like a line, a dot, a little segment, and I mix up how long the lines are, how long the dots are. So again, I'm just sort of placing one at the center each time around, filling it in until I like the density of it. And I'm not going all the way out to the outer edge, but towards it. And I might add more later to extend those rays out a little further, but I want to kind of see how the overall drawing is feeling in terms of how full it is and what it needs. So just moving pretty quickly, filling in all the little gaps. And now we're going to deal with the night sky. And remember, what we're drawing is negative space. So you're going to draw stars, but you're not going to draw the objects of the stars. You're going to draw around the stars. So they're going to feel kind of big and clunky, but I promise you want them that way. And what I do when I draw stars in an illustration like this is mix up, like that one, see how I squished the bottom of the star? That's not even going to show up once I color the night sky in. So leave a lot of room for your little stars to have some light, because again, you can always fill them in more and make them smaller, but you can't make them bigger once the outline's there. But what I started to say was I draw stars with varying numbers of points in varying proportions. So like a 4-pointed star, a 5-pointed star. Some of the little 5-pointed stars I aim for sort of round, and some are long and with longer arms. And then here I'm adding little squares, and I might put in some circles. And these aren't the only gaps or the only little points of light that you're going to leave, but it at least gives you a sense of how to distribute the shapes evenly across your sky once you start coloring it in. And yeah, you don't have to do this. Like you can just leave white gaps, but it helps me know where to pause when I'm coloring it in. And then I just sort of outline with my thicker Sharpie. And, it's a little bit tedious at first when you're trying to protect the shapes that you've drawn. I outline them somewhat carefully, and then I just color in around them. I just fill it in with Sharpie. And again, the Sharpie is going to bleed a little bit, so a couple of these shapes that you see here sort of get eaten by my Sharpie. It ends up a little too close and they disappear, and that is okay. So this is a point in the drawing where you can really relax. It's sort of like coloring in a coloring page that you've created on your own. I break the night sky up into sections, color it in, and then move on to the next one. So I'm going to let you move forward with this process, and I'll catch you again once your night sky is filled in. Okay, now that you've got your night sky all filled in, and you'll see mine, I just left some really messy little specks of light shining through. I'm noticing now that I got the weight and the darkness of the sky, I wanted a little bit more weight on the sunshine side of things. So I'm not going to cover all the lines in this big, thicker weight marker because I think that would look too heavy. But I just wanted to have a little bit more visual weight on that side. So I'm going through and maybe every third or fourth one, um, just retracing my line and darkening it up a little bit. Little by little, remember gradually working incrementally because you can always add more marker, you can't take any away until it feels a little bit more balanced. Okay, so we're getting close to a finished drawing here, but if you're like me, I looked back and I was like, oh man, these little, contour tendrils, they kind of look more like cracks than contour lines. I wasn't really happy with how they looked. I wasn't happy how they balanced with the shaded side. So I didn't really know what I was going to do, but I went in here to try and fix them. And I told you to skip the tendril part. So now you can join me again if you want. You can join me in my goal was to make them more smooth and more consistent across the faces of the ridges. So rather than like little branches or roots, I wanted to make them um, like facets of the mountain side, if that makes any sense. So I just extended them a little more. And again, you'll see me experimenting here. Like I didn't know what I was doing, but little by little, I played with how I could make those lines um, show up in a way that I was a little bit more happy with. One other thing I did that I was noticing as I was trying to, sort of fix or like the contour lines more was really accentuate the ski lines down the center of each ridge. And that did two things, or I wanted to do two things by darkening them a little bit or thickening the lines, was clean up the way that the shading lines meet that center curved line. So by thickening it, you kind of clean up the little joints. Um, and then the second thing that happens is it hides some of the imperfections in cleaning it up, but it also will just give a little bit more visual weight to what's happening between the dark and the light rather than the lines in the light sections itself. So it just still kind of looks creepy. It looks like a creepy Halloween tree to me. But we're going to move it forward. We're going to fix it. Don't worry. So, one thing I did was I went and got like a much finer gel point pen, and that helped fix the way that the fine tip Sharpie was bleeding. In trying to fix these sides, I just felt like I was making them messier and sort of chunky and, I don't know, garish. And so having a finer tip gel point pen that wasn't going to bleed seems like it would help. And so that was the first line that I extended towards the side of the peak, and it actually really helped. And then I felt like, okay, I know what this is going to be now. And the recipe then became just to weave these lines across the entire face of the mountain. Instead of having them stop midway through or be these little branches or roots, they can kind of become a texture of strings that just touch each other or blend together in certain points. And then I started to feel hopeful again. I was like, okay, I can see how I'm going to like that, even if it's not perfect or if, the placement of the lines isn't necessarily what I would have chosen originally, I can make it work. So just go slowly. Um, I really think sometimes drawings are a combination of intuition and listening. Like, it sounds silly, but like, where does the line want to go? Like where's the line headed if it is the most liney line that it can be? Or if this is a song and each line is a note, which note is going to harmonize instead of clash or sound dissonant? Which direction does it need to go? And is it straight or wobbly? Does it touch right there or higher up or further down? And just taking it a step at a time, you can kind of almost intuit what the drawing needs. So that might sound pretty woo. It might be hard to comprehend what I mean when I say that. I had someone in a class feel pretty uncomfortable with that, like need some really concrete information about how to do that. And if you want, you've got the visuals and you can just follow exactly where my lines are and put them there too. And that is okay. Like you're experiencing the drawing in exactly the same way when you do that. But if you can, just listen, listen like a poet listens for a poem, and they become just a vehicle to record the poem that is coming through them. So your job in making this drawing is to record the drawing that wants to be drawn. And now I'm getting real philosophical, and this may be something that's just my experience, and that's okay. Either way, I hope you're having fun. So I'm speeding up the video a little bit here just because it's somewhat repetitive. I'm just filling in these lighter sides with a really gentle network of lines that weave together. And this is sort of the last step. So you're completing these lighter sides where the light is shining from the sun and the moon. And I just wanted to give you a view of how that comes together. But sort of the particulars of where the lines are and how they fill those spaces is up to you. There's nothing really more to tell you about that. So feel free to skip a little bit forward, but we're in the home stretch. Once you get these filled in, you've got your drawing pretty much there. Okay, so the final step is to grab an eraser if you like, and if you have one. I didn't mention it in the materials because I actually didn't anticipate erasing the lines, and I think that's okay. You can leave them. They're light enough, they won't show up. And again, this isn't meant to be sort of a finished gallery piece. It's more for the process than the product. But if they're driving you crazy, go grab an eraser, and you'll notice there aren't that many, but just kind of whiten up the light parts, and you've got your drawing. I hope you're so pleased with this, and I hope you feel a sense of peace and focus, and that you had fun. Trust yourself. Let me know if you have any questions or reflections here, and I look forward to seeing you next time.